he spoke with them. And then what happened? He was sitting in jail, and all of a sudden, one day, like that, he was pulled out, and in one day, he was appointed the Viceroy of Egypt. The switch. So in order to give encouragement to anybody that we see inside, man or woman, and they think their lives are done and there's no hope, I tell them about the first Jewish person in prison. And it did go well for him. He didn't have anybody. He didn't have any family to go to. He was in a foreign land, and yet he went straight from the bottom to the top in one day. And then I also speak to them about what they face on transition back into society. Joseph, it was a little different. Finally, the family came to him. They didn't know how to deal with him. There was again, the whole family was affected by the whole situation. But Joseph did not become bitter at his family. He didn't say, oh, look what they did to me, and I'm going to take revenge on them. He was humble, and he knew that it was all God's plan in order for him to be there to save the whole family, and he didn't blame his family at all. He loved them, and he repaid them with kindness. So again, a lot of people on the inside, I have to tell them that, again, they shouldn't be bitter with their family either. A lot of the families say, we don't want to speak to you right now. You're a disappointment. You're a black eye to the family. And I tell all my clients that, you know what? If you go out, you stabilize yourself, you get over your addiction problem, or you get your mental health problems taken care of, or you just find a place to live and get a job. And if you are fine for 5-6 months, your family will return to you. And it happens many times. The parents and the family or the wife initially say, stay away, but after the person straightens themselves out. And we have one of our staff members works with all the mothers and families and wives, and we have somebody else that works with each person when they get out to help them along to stabilize their life. And we are actually keeping families together that way. But I always share that story with Joseph because I think that addresses many, many of the issues.
I'm just curious with regard to anti-Semitism in the prison, with regard to neo-Nazis or skinheads or Aryan, white supremacist groups. Is there any special protection or look at, or Jewish folks so few in number in the prison system that they're kind of escape their gaze? I can't imagine it's a comfortable environment to be.
Okay, the question was about different anti-Semitic groups in prison. So all those groups do exist. Sometimes they're not the inmates. Sometimes they're the officers. Those things do exist, but to the credit of the Illinois Department of Corrections, we do live in America, and I still think, like I said before, a Jew in prison is safer than a Jew in Europe today. People aren't, yes, people have homemade weapons and people could do things, but the prisons until 1996, there was a time the gangs were running the prisons. It was a free-for-all. There were weapons. There was everything. But since then, I mean, it's a good almost 20 years since that time. The authorities have taken back control of the prisons. Everything's more controlled. For the most part, nobody's walking around with weapons. A person could go into protective custody if they feel threatened. Are there still incidents? Are there people that say things? Yes, I have men come to me all the time. What I always tell my clients is that most of the incidents are lip. It's talking, it's trash talking, and I tell them just superimpose the picture of a big ape or a big pit bull on the person that's saying that, and make believe it's somebody barking at you. What are you going to do when the dog barks at you? You're going to get worried? You just walk. The dog is barking. I try to advise my clients to diffuse the situation, and it works for the most part. Unfortunately, there are incidents. There are incidents. I have a man who, I know you might find this strange, but the Department of Corrections does not allow Jews to have a Star of David. Because, you ever heard of the gangster disciples? They're cousins with the dreidel disciples. That was a bad joke. But their symbol is the 6-point star. So since it's used by that gang, they don't want, and there's a lot of that gang in prisons, they don't want the 6-point star. So this man got a chai, 2 Hebrew letters, a ches and a yud, and he was at Stateville. He wasn't even in Bernard. He was up north. And the lieutenant took it from him. He says, it looks like a gun, it looks like something, you can't have it. And he took it away from him, even though he was cleared to have it. And he actually, he was fighting about it. He ended up getting beat up. He was all black and blue, and it became a whole uproar. It got written up in the Jewish paper, because his mother when she went online, he was transferred to a new prison to get him away from there. So when they took his snapshots and put his picture online, it was still with all the black and blue marks. So his mother had that picture, and that was the front page of the Chicago Jewish News. And there was a law firm that took the case, and he was successful in winning the case, and he got a few dollars in his pocket. But that was with a staff member, though, and it does happen. I wanted to tell is there any other questions?
Rabbi,
yes.
Do you have any information on rates of recidivism for people that you've ministered to once they're out?
I have statistics on rates of recidivism. For the general public, 50 to 70% of people that go out are rearrested within a certain period of time. If the people attend a service while they're in prison, whether it's Jewish, Catholic, Protestant, Muslim, any service, it drops to 40%. If, when they get out, they join a synagogue, a church, any religious, and they go to prayer services, it drops to about 25%. And if they are mentored, they have a personal mentor, then the rates of recidivism nationally drop to 9.8%. The people that our clients that we're servicing and that get out, we are closer to I would say probably we have a recidivism rate of 10 to 15%. Most of the people we see, 8 to 9, stay out for good. They don't go back. I find my hardest clients to keep out of prison are people that are addicted to heroin or some other strong addictions. It's very, very hard, and that leads them back into prison many times. But most of the other people I see, they are able to stay out after they get out, and that's because of the contact and staying in touch with them and the families. Because all that is done.
Aside from your salary, do they give you a budget for staff?
The Illinois prison system does not give a salary. Me and my son are on a contract which pays us. We're limited to 1 or 2 hours in each prison at a certain rate. So we didn't get in this to get rich, but and the state of Illinois, you know how unbroke the state is, right? They're 6 months behind on paying vendors, and we are vendors. So we have to. All our support comes from the public at large. We do fundraising. We're actually applying to the Jewish Federation of Chicago for a $25,000 grant, and but most of it is raised through private individuals. That's the way we fund the work that we do.
Are other states that way, or just Illinois?
Most states actually have volunteer chaplains. Illinois is one of the few states that has that allows contracts. Most other states are everything's volunteer. Cook County Jail, all the county jails are volunteer. The federal system has contracts too, but that just that takes care of travel and to phrase a little of the cost, but it doesn't cover salaries and programs. But that's fine. We're in it for the mission, to save souls, to save people.
Didn't the Rebbe have this program started?
The Rebbe spoke about it, and that's why the Lubavitcher Rebbe was very strongly encouraged his followers not to forget Jews or people that are on the margins of society, people that have mental health problems, people that have disabilities, people that are stuck in a hospital, people that are in a prison. He always encouraged by every holiday to make sure they get matzah, they get a Megillah read to them, to all the groups that are in these, or in the military. Any groups of Jews that are isolated from the general community, he very much encouraged. Or even coming to little towns like Carbondale, in small communities, to make sure that every person is reached out to. And it's interesting, in Hebrew, the word for exile is gola. And the word for redemption is gi'ula. And the only difference between gola and geula is one Hebrew letter. That one letter is the first letter in the Hebrew alphabet, Aleph. And there's an organization out of Florida which originally started this work. It's called the Aleph Institute. Why is it called the Aleph Institute? Because that's the idea of bringing that Aleph into the place of exile, into the prison, to bring freedom to people, to redeem people. We actually would have been called the Aleph Institute in Illinois, but after my wife passed away close to 2 years ago, we named our program the Hinda Institute, which my wife's name, Mendel's mother's name, was Hinda. And Hinda, we broke out into an acronym for helping individuals ascend. So it's the same idea of lifting people up or bringing redemption into their life. Now, you ready for a story? Might make your hair stand up, but I told you, men, especially that have done the crime of taking a life, ask if they could be forgiven. And I had this one particular man, when I met him, when he committed his crime, he was all of 16. He took the life of a fellow 16-year-old classmate, a female, and details are not necessary. He was tried as an adult. He was sentenced to 14 to 21 years. At that time, it was before 1980, so he got to see the parole board, and it was at 50%. So 14 years meant after 7 years, he saw the parole board, and at that time, they released him. So he started serving a sentence at 17. By 24, he was out. I started seeing him in the juvenile facility, and he really didn't claim to be innocent. He opened his heart out. He cried his heart out. He was crying. And he just wanted to know if he could ever be forgiven. And I told him, of course, you have heard of the holiday Yom Kippur, correct? On Yom Kippur, it's the Day of Atonement. It is true that if you break one of the laws of Yom Kippur is not going to help you out. But aside from that, there is no sin in the world that you can't be forgiven for. Anything you've done, you could be forgiven for, even what that man did. So he started getting into his religious identity. By the time he was 18, he already had his head covered. He was already wearing tzitzit, and he was putting on tefillin, and he was transferred to the adult facility, got kosher food there, and he went out really, really, really ready. When he walked out of prison, he looked like a fully religious young man, fully observing everything. He went off and he went to a rabbinic college. He didn't become a rabbi, but he went to a school for people that are returning, and it's also in Morristown, New Jersey. And a couple of years went by. What happens when somebody's 27, 28? Time to get married. So let me ask you, comes time to get married, who was going to marry someone who did what he did. So he approached a group of rabbis, his teachers. What is he supposed to do? He was advised that he should not disclose his crime during the dating process until the point comes, if he does find someone and someone's attracted to him and somebody's serious about him, he cannot become engaged until he tells that person at that point. In other words, he doesn't have to say, hey, this is what I am. Want to date me? He doesn't have to do that. But he may not get married to the person without disclosing the information to that person. So this man did that. And an amazing thing happened. He disclosed it to the girl. I remember the girl called me. I spoke with her, and she decided she'll do it. They wrote a letter to the Lubavitcher Rebbe for a blessing if he blesses that union. He said, yes, they should get married. And they set a date for the wedding. In the engagement period, the girl started getting some cold feet, and they would maybe call it off, but they both had a chance to pass again before the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he encouraged them that they should get married. They shouldn't break it off. Came the day of the marriage. I remember I flew to New York. She was a girl from New York. The marriage was in Brooklyn. I went to the wedding, and I remember two things about the wedding. The bride was crying the entire wedding, and the mentor of this young man from the school pulled him on the side and he said, if you ever lift a finger during this marriage, you're going to be the big loser. That was the message his teacher gave him. So they're married, and the marriage only lasted 3 months. When he came home, after the 7-day celebration, the woman was first verbally abusive, then she was spitting at him, kicking, scratching, throwing things at him, and the marriage just couldn't stay. And they had to break it up. And I remember he called me, what's going on? I go to prison, I changed my life, what's going on? So, since I'm the rabbi with no answers, I said, I don't know. But I'll tell you a story. I'm a rabbi with stories, not with answers. So I said, I'll tell you a story. And I told him a story of the first Lubavitcher Rebbe and Rabbi Schneur Zalman. I think there's a little boy in town in Carbondale called Schneur. He's named after that great rabbi. And there was a man who was a follower of this great teacher, and he was a very kind man. He used to teach people publicly. He took off his time, but something was not right in his life. When he was in the middle of his class, his wife would come into the lecture, come up to the podium, and embarrass him publicly. She would embarrass him publicly. He would get so embarrassed. First he would turn red, then he would become pale white. And this happened day after day, time after time. Well, this chassid, when it came an opportunity to have a private audience with the Rebbe, he went in and he said, Rebbe, I can't take this anymore. Can I divorce my wife? He said, no, don't divorce your wife. Stay in the marriage. So he fortified himself with more patience and to bear whatever she's able to put upon him. And she became increasingly more abusive and embarrassed him even more. She must have hung out with all the comedians that have the one-liners. She was singing it to him. Oh man, this guy, she would just embarrass him. Everybody in the crowd was laughing and making fun of him. Couldn't take it. So he went back a second year, and the Rebbe said, stay in the marriage. Again, he fortifies himself, but she got even worse. And at this time, the third time he went in, after a third year of this, he was like, he looked like he was going to have a nervous breakdown. So the Rebbe said, sit down, I have to tell you a story. Right? Rabbis tell stories. So he said, your soul comes from a period in time called the First Temple Era. And if you ever read the prophets during the first temple era, what did they always warn the people about? The sin of idolatry. The people were worshiping this idol, that idol, that idol. And so we know a Jew goes to synagogue normally 3 times a day. Morning, afternoon, evening. So he said, you were worshiping idols back then. Morning, afternoon, evening. We know idolatry is one of the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments is capital punishment. So you lived your life and you died. But every time you worshipped idols, that's a blemish on your soul. So when you died, it took off one of the times. Now, your soul is back. Has all these, you're a good man, but your soul still has these blemishes from a previous time. And it says in the Talmud that what would a person would rather die than be publicly embarrassed. Why? Because when you embarrass someone, and not only do they turn red, but they turn pale, it means all the blood is rushing out of their head. It's like you're killing them publicly. Your wife, who's the other part of your soul, knows what needs to be done to your soul. She has been cleansing your soul. Every time she's embarrassed you, it's taking away one of those blemishes of your soul. He says, Rebbe, if that's the case, I'm staying married. And every time after she embarrassed him, he would buy chocolates for her. He'd buy her flowers. He took her out to dinner. He understood. And after a while, it subsided. So I told this young man the story. He says, I don't know if this is your case, but it says in Maimonides, in the laws of repentance, how do you know if a man really repented? Well, if he did something when he was young, and then he turns, he's 95 years old, he can barely move, nothing works anymore, and he never commits a sin, you don't know if he really repented. But if you're the same strength, and you're the same, have all the abilities, and you come to the same situation, and at that time, you don't do the same thing again, you've repented. So he said, the only thing I could think of is, you, at age 16, did the worst thing you could do to a woman, to the ultimate degree. Now, for 3 months, somebody verbally, physically, threw things at you, punched you, hurt you, and you did not ever lift a finger. You didn't do anything back. I would say that that is a proof that you've really repented. That's the only thing I could tell him. Eventually, he did get remarried. And I just saw his son, who is about 18 or 19 now, and his son's going to be a rabbi soon. And he has a daughter who's after Bas Mitzvah. And don't worry, he continues suffering. His second wife eventually divorced him too. But, you know, he's still in touch with her, and he's still a good man. But I tried to explain to him that, you know, you may never ever see total peace in your life. You took a life. I don't know what the price is for that, but he remains faithful. He's, you know, he doesn't complain that much. He understands his lot. But that's just one story of one man. And I thought that's an interesting story. I'll tell you one more story of, you've all heard of Louis Farrakhan?
Yeah.
The story of how Louis Farrakhan got a Baptist minister to put on tefillin. And the story goes as follows. It's not a long story. There's a big county jail up north called Cook County Jail. On the average day, there's 10,000 people there. And they have a council of chaplains. And so I got a call from a minister one day, Rabbi, would you like to join the council? I had never gone to Cook County Jail because when I came to Chicago, there was an older rabbi going there, and I didn't want to step on his toes and bump in on him. But he passed away, so there was no rabbi there. He says, Rabbi, we need you. I said, why? He says, Louis Farrakhan wants to join the board. We don't want the Nation of Islam. And we figured if we put a Jew on the council, he won't want to come on. Would you like to come and join? Well, I wanted to get on. I couldn't care less about the Nation of Islam. I wanted to get in because I wanted to help Jewish people over there. So I agreed, and I met this minister, and I started speaking with him. But as I was speaking and the conversation turned on, turns out he had a Jewish mother. His name is Moshe, and I had put on tefillin with him before the end of the meeting. And a few months later, I met his non-Jewish wife on Sukkot. I went with Lulav and Esrog, but I spoke with her, and her mother's Jewish, and her Hebrew name is Leah or something, and I said the blessing. So two Jews got together, and they're posing as Baptist ministers, but funny things happen. So there's all types of people we meet, not just that are, you also have Jewish guards working there, right? So, any other questions? Do we have any more time, or?
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay. I'm a social worker, and I want to work with the prison population. You might not have the answer, but I would like what will be your best advice for me when I work with this population, as approaching them, or
You presently work with the.
I will when I graduate. I'm graduating.
In what? How will you be working with them? A social worker?
Social workers.
What I would advise you is, this may sound like a mixed message, but it's not. It's two different messages. First thing is to remember that inside each person there's a good part. There's a diamond in part. If you dig deep enough into every person, all the treasures are deep in the ground. Where do you find all the precious metals and the oil? You have to drill deep into the ground. That's the way it's in a